Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, broads.
Broads, happy holidays. Happy...
You're trying to think of all the holidays.
I know list of them. Well, I think
Happy Kwanzaa.
technically, I think this is
Hanukkah.
the second day of Hanukkah. Merry Christmas in a couple days. And we wanted to make sure on the week that we're celebrating all these different holidays that we can provide you a episode filled with merriment. And this is not, we're dropping this, I believe it's a Monday, because we want to have something that you guys can listen to while you're maybe driving to family or sitting by the fire and listening
Roasting
to
chestnuts,
Yeah.
as one does.
As one does. Never have in my life.
Or as you're driving to your retail job on Christmas Eve.
I was doing that a couple years ago on a
that
Christmas. That was hard.
Dude, that sucks.
I was watching through the window, like crying, watching the people like drink their
These
hot
happy
chocolate.
families.
It's just like, I don't have anybody.
What's worse,
full
Christmas
family.
Eve or Black Friday?
Oh, Black Friday used to make me angry, and Christmas Eve
Makes
made
you
me
sad.
very sad, very low. It wasn't a high point for me.
Well, if you're doing that, we feel you.
Seriously, we get you, we see you. But we wanted to add a little bit of cheer to your life. So we wanted to do a holiday episode.
Wait, first of all, did you end up decorating?
I mean, I will have by the time that this episode comes out.
Decorated.
I saw, and it looks so nice.
All of a sudden, I was feeling kind of down, and I was like, I don't have any friends in Long Beach. I hate my life. And then I was like, I'm going to go get a Christmas tree, and I'm going to go to Home Depot and get lights. And then
And it looked so nice.
my whole world has changed now. Anyway,
Anyways,
let's get into it.
last year we dropped a Christmas episode, and we talked all about Santa. We
Yes,
talked all
the
about
great
like
Santa
our
debate.
the Santa debate, our old Santa stories. We had some broads, I believe, like
With some
send us
incredibly
emails.
traumatic stories.
Super traumatic.
Remember that kid who was like 14 and like still thought that Santa was real?
Yeah, and his parents or her parents were telling her like, no, he's real, even when she was like begging to know. Horrible. Anyways. We
You can
figured
go back and listen to that if you'd like to. It's like in one of our first 10 episodes. So.
but we figured we'd change the direction. And so we thought we'd go nativity direction this year.
Yeah. And yes.
And we needed a special guest because God knows we needed it. And I've been also wanting to have him on the podcast for quite some time.
Oh yeah, why don't you begin this intro on how?
Well, I discovered this person by listening to Rob Bell's podcast, who we've had on this show before. And the first time I heard him, I started to all of a sudden dive bomb into YouTube videos and read a book and became a huge fan of you. So Peter Rollins.
Oh, wow.
I've dive
Thank
bombed
you.
in the past 24 hours and have become a huge fan.
Wow.
Peter, do you like Peter Rollins or Pete better?
Pete.
Oh.
Pete.
You're like neither,
No.
girlfriend.
Dr.
Dr. Rollins,
please.
please. Let's keep this formal. I'm very nervous because why was I nervous? You said about Christmas cheer, and people know me as kind of I sell nihilism for money and alcohol. So I don't know. I'm going to have to be a lot more cheery. My work is quite dark.
This is not going to get
Okay.
positive. Oh no, listen.
My work is about coming to terms with death and suffering and the ultimate cold death of the universe. So happy Christmas, sir.
Which actually, we'll definitely get into this, but I think there's, in a way, a jolly, joyful spin on that.
Yes, there is.
Agreed,
That's why I
agreed.
do it. If you run away from the suffering, you just end up in it even more. Funnily enough, the way out of darkness is into it. That's why if you go to a psychoanalyst and you're like, listen, there's so much horrible stuff and there's a big trap door beside me and there's these tentacles coming out and these monsters and I just want you to close the trap door, the analyst will actually push you in. But the reason why they push you in is because actually that's the way to get out. So I think you're absolutely right. Sadly, the way out of darkness is to face it. But there you go.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, wow. We're already starting jolly.
Listen, we talk about the Enneagram on this show quite a bit, and I'm a 4, so I'm like, the darker, the more happy I am.
Yes, painted
So let's
black.
get it.
Yeah.
Do you know what your Enneagram number
I
is?
don't, I'm
It's okay. I'm not.
Is that right?
I don't really get it still,
Yeah.
even though we had an expert on.
I'm deeply involved.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have got real insight into themselves through the Enneagram. I was also nervous about because I thought this was not going to be about the Enneagram, but potentially about the Bachelor. So I've been doing a lot of research. If that's what we're going to be talking about. I've watched every season in preparation for this.
He's really been caught up.
Yeah.
It's been 6 weeks of just, you know, looping on your TV, you know.
I've got to tell people who are listening, but there's one thing I know about The Bachelor, and you didn't know what I was talking about. So I have a friend, a guy I met in Nashville called Brady Toops. And we hang out, and when he's in LA, we hang out. And I didn't find out until I hung out with him a few times, but he was an early contestant on The Bachelor.
It wasn't actually that long ago, relatively speaking.
If the broads listening watched Kaitlyn Bristowe and Britt's season from the top, well, it was Kaitlyn's season, but it started off with a competition kind of, which was such an awkward thing between her and Britt. And Brady took off after Britt when they sent her home.
Yeah, so basically they didn't get enough votes for Britt. And then Brady was like, I'm not staying on Kaitlyn's season, and followed Britt.
And he followed Britt. So I didn't tell you his name, and we're trying to guess. But as soon as I showed you a picture, you were like, you knew it all.
I knew.
Suddenly
it all
came out.
It just came flooding back. But yeah, no, poor Pete. We're like, yeah, we're just a full Bachelor podcast.
We're actually going to be doing a recap.
Why did you invite me on?
We wanted to get your philosophical take on The Bachelor.
On The Bachelor,
actually, that could be incredibly
That could be really
fascinating.
fun, but I'd have to watch a couple. Yeah. By the way, spoiler. I think it's not a spoiler now, but they never ended up sticking together.
No.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately.
Tragic.
That happens a
fair
good amount
amount
of the time.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that it's
beautiful
not the
love
best
stories.
way to get a partner? Who would
There
have
are some beautiful love stories
You know
that have come from
though?
it.
I always say, you know, you could meet your partner at the grocery store, at a funeral. Why not meet them on TV,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Very true.
Absolutely.
And you're
I mean,
bonded together for life.
Didn't work for me, but whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not bitter about it.
no.
Were you on it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
What?
No, that's why we started doing this.
I didn't realize. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. I'm starstruck. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So what happened? I mean, everyone knows, so I shouldn't get into it. But what happened?
Well, I'll give a very brief thing. So I have to toot my own horn. I was the first girl to ever have a pixie cut on the show
Wow.
in 22 seasons. I was
No
the
one
first
has-
girl to ever have hair above her shoulders.
Nor since. No short hair. She
Yeah.
was the
which
first.
is just
First and last?
insane.
My
apparently.
goodness. Wow.
And I was on this guy Ari season. Basically, what happened was I got 5th place and I got sent home in Italy. And then he picked a girl, got engaged to her. Then 2 or 3 months later, he dumped her on camera and got with the runner-up.
Uh-huh.
Reunited with the runner-up, got engaged to her, and actually they're now married and have a kid.
Wow.
So it's kind of funny because they're one of the success stories.
Right,
even
and
though
Yeah.
a lot of the success stories are the ones that end up breaking up with the original one and then going with the
their
one
heart.
they didn't choose.
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah, in psychoanalysis, there's an interesting thing where you have to have obstacles. So the person that you get is not necessarily one you want. You want the person who you can't get. The term making love actually used to be about this. 2 people don't make love. You have a third person who makes love, and that's a chaperone. A chauffeur drives your car. A chaperone gets in the middle of 2 people
and prevents a
Prevents it.
barrier from them getting together.
Exactly, because you think that the chaperone is there to stop you from doing anything untoward, but actually they're there to start getting you to fantasize about what you could do if only they weren't there to
They're
stop
creating
it.
tension.
So they were making love. They were creating desire. Wow. So in terms of like dating apps and stuff, it's often when you talked about the things that work, you realize sometimes it's the person I didn't choose, but then I bumped into them at an event, or something has to get in the way to generate desire. So
That's fascinating.
fascinating.
Okay, so that actually makes sense. Why? Or maybe the people on the show who have like love triangles, and then they lose the person temporarily, and then get them back, and all
love
that kind of
triangles are key. Like there's there's certain people who, this is very typical for a guy. Often guys can only desire what they don't have. So they're with somebody and then they start desiring someone else. And often women, although it's not completely gendered, but it's just more typical, often desire what's about to be taken away from them. So in a love triangle, you get a couple, maybe there's no desire. And then the guy starts to go out with, have an affair with somebody, and then it's found out. and you think they're going to split up because the woman's really pissed off. The man says, well, listen, the relationship's dead. But then what happens is a week later, they're back together again. There's desire in the relationship. They hate each other, but they're like, they can't keep their hands off each other. And it's partly because the man was desiring this woman because she was impossible. As soon as the obstacle was taken away, he's like, I don't want to go out with her. She's crazy. And the woman, as soon as her partner's starting to be under threat to being taken away, she starts to go, oh, actually, you know, maybe I want him. And so love triangles are this very dysfunctional way for people to keep desire
So
alive.
you're saying our listeners, if they're having issues, should make their partner jealous in order to have an affair in order
That's
to bring
right.
things back together.
That's right.
Got it. I love this. I love this takeaway.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Actually, it's kind of funny because my boyfriend yesterday told me he had this dream, and he was like, I had a great dream last night. We were like at this camp or something, and but we had never gotten together, and you weren't into me, and his whole dream was about him trying to catch me alone.
That's very good. That's very interesting.
And I was like,
yeah.
did you end up like hooking up with me? And he was like, no, you always had something to do and were always tired and like whatever, and I never got to have my moment with you. And he like thought that dream was great.
That's interesting because dreams are the site of truth. The funny thing is our waking life is really our dream life. That's the fake life. That's where we pretend we're all together and everything's fine. And sometimes we have to wake up in order to dream. You have a nightmare that's so close to your truth that you have to wake up in order to distance yourself from your truth. So in your dreams, that's why in analysis, you listen to your dreams because your dreams tell you deep truth that you can't see in your waking life, because your waking life is your Facebook profile. It's your carefully curated, I'm fine presentation. But in your dreams and your nightmares, you encounter your desires and fears and all of that. So in a way, actually, a love triangle isn't a problem, it's the solution to a problem. Just like alcoholism isn't the problem, it's the solution to a problem. But it's the solution that creates its own problems. So when you see someone in a love triangle, think about what is the problem that is trying to solve. And it's the problem of desire. It's a problem of how to desire the other. In fact, some people are jealous, not because they love because they're jealous, i.e., the only way they can keep their love alive is to be jealous. So, these are, but this is not what we're here to talk about. But desire is a fascinating subject. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. We definitely need to do a bachelor analysis episode with you.
For
We're gonna
real. But then I'm also wondering, like, so what are the healthy alternatives to solve these problems versus...
Yeah, but this is interesting because one of the healthy ways potentially is how do you create barriers within your relationship? How do you create deadlocks, impossibilities, and antagonisms within a couple?
To keep passion alive without going and cheating on your spouse, et cetera.
Exactly. Because if you don't create an internal deadlock, you'll create an external deadlock. And then that causes problems. You see it all the time in people who, if they can't, basically you want this perfect relationship because there's a fantasy of we can complete each other. Like, those little necklaces where they're like two hearts split,
right,
and you kind of connect. I'm trying to make one where it's a heart split into two, but they don't fit together. So you can, because that's the better thing is like we want to complete each other, but that's actually death. It's so boring. It gets rid of the contradictions of life. So then what you find is a person will, in order to bring antagonism back, they'll do stuff externally. So the trick is, how do you create struggle within your relationship?
So maybe like a healthy alternative would be like having hobbies and a career and friends and all these sort of things that like you have things to do and you don't have time to spend with this person all the time.
Yes. And even like gameplay, even kind of like, go away for a month and say, you're not coming with me, or create obstacles within the relationship.
Be like, I'm going to Europe for a month. Bye.
I swear to God, it's going to help our relationship. This is for you, really.
This is for you. I'm being very selfless.
Wait, but if I'm thinking about Bachelor stuff, this is reminding me of Dean and Kaitlyn. Remember how I said they're going to last?
Yeah.
This is my prediction. It's this couple that was on The Bachelor. And he is just very much like this traveler who never really wanted to commit. And she's kind of like, I would say she's like a romantic who like wants him, but it seems like he's always sort of unavailable. And they ended up getting together. And I said on past episodes, I'm like, I think they're going to stay together the longest out of everyone on this season because there's like this dynamic of like always being one step away from each other in a way.
That's right. Have you ever seen The Bridges of Madison County or read the book? Yeah. It's beautiful. And it's a beautiful description of this, because the woman she's a bored housewife with a nice but kind of boring husband, and then this really cool photographer, as you know, comes into town, Clint Eastwood, and he is trouble, right? And he's like this impossibility but represents an escape from middle America, escape from her family, escape from everything. But she's caught in an impossible scenario. Does she stay with the boring relationship, or does she go off with the exciting guy, which we all know would be a disaster because they would never work out. He's been single all his life. He's just too crazy. And so the movie actually, it ends in a romantic way, but not with an expression of the truth. And the romantic thing is that she stays with her husband, but always fantasizes about him, and eventually they're buried together, or their ashes are scattered at the bridges of Madison County. So it's very beautiful.
Wow.
But it captures the dilemma that many of us face in desire, which is you feel this pull between the boring and safe and the adventurous and exciting. And either way, you feel you're going to make a mistake. So, you go away with the exciting, it's going to be a disaster. You stay with the boring, you're going to be living dead. And the question is, how do you bring those two things into your relationship in a way in which it is exciting and dangerous and also stable and enriching? So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to get at the bottom of that one for the rest of my life, figuring that one out.
Okay, so we've already talked about The Bachelor and desire, and we're about to hear more about Pete and philosophy and the Nativity and the history of Christmas. But speaking of Christmas, it's in a few days, and what that means for me personally is that I will be eating quite a bit of chocolate. It's what I do for myself during the holidays, and what that also means is that my skin will be angry with me. I know I will inevitably break out, but I am taking the mother of all pimple treatments down to my mother's house for the celebration. In preparation, it's Meltdown by Bloom. You broads know that Bekah and I are wild for Meltdown. Most acne medications leave your skin dry and irritated. Meltdown by Bloom is so different. It's an all-natural, proprietary blend of essential oils that leaves you with clear, glowy skin while minimizing blemishes and clearing up redness. And listen to me. Meltdown will reduce the size and redness of pimples overnight, at least for me personally, and they completely disappear within 3 to 4 days. I have never had any sort of spot treatment that works as quickly and effectively as Meltdown. It's legitimately crazy. And Bekah taught me to mix it in with my foundation or moisturizer because it dries clear and smooth. It's amazing. Taking care of business all while still having your makeup or moisturizer on. Thank you, Meltdown. It's also vegan and cruelty-free. It's pregnancy safe, and you can check out Bloom for other safe, sustainable self-care products, including face wash, toner, deodorant, and organic pads and tampons. They truly are an incredible company. And right now, our listeners will get 25% off and free shipping when you go to bloom.com/chatty. That's bloom.com/chatty for 25% off Meltdown Spot Treatment by Bloom. If you don't love it, return it for a full refund, no questions asked. That's BLUME.com/chatty.
Okay, anyway, let's get into
let's get into it.
That's actually
I know,
fascinating.
That's very fascinating. Well, I realized that we really didn't even give you an introduction to
Yeah.
We just told you we're fans, and then so can you give us a little blurb about who you are, what you do?
How you got started doing it, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm always rubbish at this. And in LA or anywhere you ask, what do you do? You're like, what do I do?
Exactly.
It's a difficult one. So I guess I do, so I'm trained in philosophy, and I use philosophy and psychoanalysis and other disciplines to, I suppose a lot of my work is about helping people come to terms with their contradictions, with their symptoms, with their difficulties. A lot of my work is about unpicking self-destructive behavior. Because that's a weird thing about human beings, by the way. You don't see it in animals, right? Animals are great utilitarians. So utilitarianism in philosophy is you act to maximize your pleasure and minimize your pain. And it's an ethical theory that we all do that. But in psychoanalysis, the idea is actually humans are terrible utilitarians. We act in ways that are destructive to us. You know, we do things that we know are bad. Like we pursue maybe the increase of money, even though we know we're going to get a heart attack or we're going to climb over our friends, or we do all of this crazy stuff. Why is it we go out with people who will always hurt us and never want to go out with the people who won't? Or why is it we always, just when we're about to succeed, we somehow do something to mess it up? Like, say something bad in a party or whatever it is. And so my work is largely about helping people to lead healthier lives individually and communally.
Is utilitarianism, is that sort of when the goal is to create like the best possible outcome? Is that what like that means? Like, for example, like in philosophy, is that when like you're a poor utilitarian if you would choose to save your child in front of a moving train versus 100 people? Is that like being a bad utilitarian? Like what's utilitarianism?
It's kind of like that, but at a deeper level, utilitarians like Bentham or Mill are kind of saying that we actually always are utilitarians. There's no way out of it. Everyone is always acting towards their best interest. And then the question is, sometimes we don't because of our education or because of misinformation. But a utilitarian says that basically we're all trying to maximize our pleasure and minimize our pain.
Okay.
Now, I think the best critique of that is actually in people like Freud, who kind of give this alternative explanation that says, well, no, we actually aren't good utilitarians. But so the theory is almost, it's not even that you can be a bad utilitarian in the sense of you always are maximizing even if you steal from a friend, you're doing that because you want to maximize your pleasure.
Okay, so when we're talking about being a utilitarian, it's about the self and not the greater good.
Yeah, and some utilitarians then say that as long as you educate people better, people, if they act for the greater good, they're acting for themselves as well. So here's an example. Here's a weird example. If there's a rumor that there's going to be a drought in LA, and so you're going, okay, there's going to be a drought. What will I do? Well, I fill my bath with water, because if I fill my bath with water, then I'll have water to drink for the next month. But then you think to yourself, if everybody fills their bath with water, we're all in trouble because there's going to be no water, right? If nobody does, then we'll all be maybe okay. There'll be a bit of a drought, but we'll all be okay. But if I fill my bath with water, right, and nobody else does, well, it's fine. And I'll have a bit more water than everybody else. If everybody else is filling their bath with water and I don't, well, I'm in big trouble. So basically what happens is it's always in your best self-interest to fill your bath with water, but that messes up everybody. So a good utilitarian will say, well, if you think about the greater good, and if everybody thinks about the greater good, we shouldn't fill our bathtubs, then everyone will do better. So that's a very bizarre way of saying that. A utilitarian might say that if we're all thinking about our self-interests, we're all going to damage everybody.
Sure.
But it's mostly a theory it's basically evolutionary psychology. It's basically a theory that humans are always wanting the best for themselves and their family and their community. And in psychoanalysis, there's an idea that we often do want the best for ourselves. Actually, we often
self-sabotaging.
Yeah, we self-sabotage. And the big question is, why do we do that? But the issue is, I work with people who want to live in community where we're healthier and so that's a bit of what I do. I set up intentional communities sometimes, and I also teach in philosophy and
What does
write.
that look like, setting up an intentional community?
Yeah, so I've set up...
That sounds like a commune, like you're setting up a commune.
It's a little bit like that, but much more dysfunctional, although they're usually dysfunctional as well. I've set up a couple of groups where mostly it's like a crowd more than a community, people who meet together maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks and engage in what I call transformance art, which is basically, it's like this, right? We all have liturgy in our life, right? Liturgy is ritual. And if you go to the pub every week, that's a liturgy. If you meet for coffee with your friends every week, or you play poker once a month, these are kind of liturgies of life. So we are liturgical creatures. But there's types of liturgy which help you escape from your suffering. So you've gone through a breakup, say, and so you go to a nightclub and you dance and you drink and you hang out with friends. That's a type of liturgy that's helping you try to avoid your suffering. It's a solution to a problem. The only issue is it doesn't really work because the next day your suffering comes back. A different type of liturgy would be like an Irish pub. Same stuff, alcohol, friends, and music. But you go to an Irish pub and you don't drink to get drunk to forget about your life. You have a couple of drinks to talk about your life. And the music's not so loud that you can't talk with your friends in an intelligent way. You know, in nightclubs, you can only shout the most basic stuff. Sure. But in a proper bar, you can actually talk. And then the music, pop music, is designed to help you forget about your suffering. Everything's great. But in Irish pub, you'll have some sad person talking about how his one true beloved died of consumption and he'll never love again, right? And what the difference between these two liturgical events is, one is helping you talk about your suffering, to put it into artistic form, so you're listening to someone sing about difficulties, and one is trying to help you avoid it. So the communities that I try to set up are more like the latter, more like the Irish pub.
Interesting.
It's a use of various techniques, technologies of the self to help us confront the darkness, not so that we despair, but actually so that we can move beyond despair and enjoy the depth and density of life. There was actually Søren Kierkegaard. He once said, what is an artist? Or what is a poet? And he said,
I just heard you quote this morning on
is that
that
right?
episode, and
no,
I immediately looked up the quote, and I have a screenshot of it on my phone right now because I was like, this is so good.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's such
continue.
a beautiful quote. I know it's beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's in his diaries. He says, what is a poet? Or maybe an either or. But a poet is someone who screams and cries in agony, but whose lips are so formed that when they cry out, beautiful music is formed. And so when we say to the poet, sing to us again, we are saying, may new disasters befall you. And it's a beautiful quote, but that's what a great artist does, is they're just crying out.
Yeah, and it says something at the end. He says something to the effect of, because we cannot stand the crying out, but the music is so beautiful.
Yes, that's right. So he says, he makes a distinction you might have seen between a music lover who can appreciate the music, but they keep themselves at a distance from the emotion of it. So they become an expert in music and they can talk about how great or not great the music is. And then he talks about the music lover who might not know anything about music, but who experiences the emotional freight that's within it. And it's actually similar to this idea of Christmas and Nativity, funnily enough, is, someone could be an expert in, say, the meaning of Christmas, but not experience the emotional freight of it. And yet someone else who might not know anything about Christmas or Christianity or religion, but they might see in this image of God as a helpless child something profoundly true. They don't even know why, but there's just something powerful about it. And actually, originally, it was a very powerful symbol because Caesar was born of a virgin. Caesar was a god. But Caesar had a kingdom that was in a mansion. And Caesar was about power and authority. So whenever the original Christians talked about the Son of God, born of a virgin, who didn't have a mansion but a manger, who didn't reign in power but in powerlessness, who didn't look after the most powerful but looked after the weakest. This was a very profound description of something.
What is this myth of Caesar you talk? I'm not familiar with this.
Oh yeah, so it was very common, like of virgin births and gods walking among us and these ideas, and so. At the time of Jesus, it was, which Caesar was it? Was it Caesar Augustus, who was claimed to be born of a virgin and to be son of God? So whenever this...
So they called him literally son of God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the term.
That was the term. So whenever this new group shows up and says, this child was born of a virgin and is the son of God, it's a political claim. It's not about, it's something very powerful, that very existential. So
kings were born of virgins, like mythically speaking, throughout.
Yeah.
Why? What's the symbolism behind that of being born of a virgin? Just that it has to be some sort of divine conception? Like, what's the use of that trope for?
I mean, I guess it's because they like a lot of power and they want to legitimate themselves via God. So to be born of God, like basically kind of an amalgamation of a woman and of God, is kind of a way to try to, in an ideological way, legitimate your power and authority. So I think, that's religion at its worst, really, is when religion is used to justify injustice and power.
Abuse of power.
Power. And that's the way it's used a lot. But then this alternative reading is very interesting then. It's kind of like religion as a critique of that use of power. So for Caesar Augustus, I think that really these claims to be the Son of God is simply a way of trying to ideologically justify their regime.
Right. And it was that way with like most Caesars, and I believe like Alexander the Great, he was like believed to be like maybe not a virgin birth, but from a god, like out of a river. There was all these like main characters in ancient history were associated with godlike births, correct? So the idea of the Son of God, Jesus, coming from where he came from was this like radical idea for the ancient Jewish listener at the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the only Immaculate Conception that I'm familiar with now, and I think most people are with the birth of Jesus. So like when we talk about it, it sort of seems like this, I don't know. I think since we're maybe distanced from that ancient tradition of recognizing the symbolism of being born of a virgin, it sort of seems like this weird, irrelevant, like not true fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus when you put it in that context, it's like, oh, it's to show this powerful, like you're saying, symbolism of like divinity brought to man, to a baby in this helpless, like sort of desperate situation.
That's it. And this is a different way of reading things. Oh, and the Immaculate Conception weirdly is slightly different from the Virgin Birth, but that's irrelevant. Well, yeah, the Immaculate Conception is a very scholastic Catholic doctrine about, I think, the purity of Mary. So, but that's by the by, just as an interest, just in case someone types, "Oh, they're different" on your comment section.
Sure.
We've covered it. Like a lot of times people read, say, a text like the Bible, and they're looking at it in terms of what's literally true or not. And the question of what meaning it has kind of gets lost. So, for example, like like a dream is a good example. If you come to me with a dream and you say, "Oh, listen, I was getting up for work and I had an Uber outside to pick me up, and then the Uber started to drive off and I was running after the Uber, but I couldn't catch it." I don't ask you whether, "Oh, did you see an Uber that day? Is that something that's happened to you before?" Right? Yeah. Dreams are made up of literal historical things and things you've seen on TV and all of that. But what I do is I take the dream absolutely literally. So I'm a literalist about the dream, and I ask, what does it mean? And I ask you, do you not want to go to work? Do you want to leave? Do you want to run away? I start to associate with what the dream means. So in a way, I take the dream absolutely literally. The issue for me with some forms of confessional Christianity is it doesn't go that deep. It was one mystic once said, like, it doesn't matter if, Jesus rose from the dead literally 100 times if he didn't rise from the dead in my being. So in other words, if there was someone rises from the dead and it's on TV, a Netflix documentary, you might watch it, but you might just watch a Marvel movie instead. Right. It's not that interesting. But if it means something about new life, if it means something, if it has freight of meaning, then it becomes something even more significant. Like a flag is just a piece of cloth. But actually, for some people, it means a lot more. It means your country. It means, all of these other things. So for me, whether it's reading the biblical text or reading a dream or whatever it is I'm trying to ask, what is the meaning that is being encapsulated in what I'm reading?
I think your example actually of the movies is a good example, because unless you're an asshole, if you're unpacking like Lord of the Rings or a Marvel movie or something in terms of like, can this actually happen?
Yes.
In terms of gravity and all that, it's like you're missing the point. Yeah. Like that's
the worst type of person to sit with at a movie.
Yes. And there's lots of jokes about them. I love it. Like I saw a Simpsons joke, and it's always the nerd who says, in episode 3, 13 minutes in, and it's like, and the joke is, of course, is like that person is not capturing the meaning of the episode. Their precision is like what Kierkegaard said about the critic. The critic can speak about every moment of the music, but the music lover captures the meaning of the entire piece. Yeah.
And so if we're unpacking things in terms of like, in a literal sense, maybe when we're looking at this story of the Nativity, you're kind of killing it. You're kind of extracting and separating the meaning and the passion and the poetry that's within it.
And there's a way in which they join together. This is what's called incarnation, as you guys will know. So incarnation is a fascinating thing. Incarnation means the absolute coincidence of opposites. It means the coming together of two, of basically the temporal and the eternal, the absolute and the subjective. So the idea of the God-man or whatever. But it's not necessarily a theological term. Can I use an example to kind of...
Yes.
So the Titanic, right, which is built in Belfast, by the way. Not many people know that. I'm from Belfast.
Yes.
Right? And we didn't drive it. The English drove it. So
blame it on them.
Yeah, we built it. It wasn't supposed to be driven in icebergs, right? So the Titanic is interesting because it was a sinking of a ship in 1912. I think it was a maiden voyage to New York. Now, 14 years before the Titanic sank, there was a short story called The Wreck of the Titan. It was also called Futility. And it was by a guy called Morgan Robinson. And it was a book that talked about a ship that was basically the same size as the Titanic on its maiden voyage in April, which is when the Titanic was on its maiden voyage, hit an iceberg in the same ocean as the Titanic, having broadly the same amount of lifeboats, broadly a similar amount of people dying, going at basically the same speed, right? So when you read these two side by side, you go, oh my goodness, the wreck of the Titan is like 14 years before the Titanic. Yeah. Wow. So the question is, why did that happen? And just to kind of shorten it down a bit, like he was an expert in shipbuilding. And this guy who wrote the short story just knew enough about ships, to work out what a disaster could be. But also ships had a symbolism at the time. They were the spaceships of the day. They were the high point of human creativity and industry. They also symbolized class distinction, the upper class at the top, the lower class at the bottom, the middle class in the middle, all working together. So these ships, they captured something of human ingenuity, human technology, romanticism of kind of discovering new lands. All of this was in it. And so he wrote a story. Then 14 years later, a purely contingent event, right? The Titanic, ships sink all the time, planes crash all the time. The question is, why has the Titanic remained with us when other ships haven't?
Right.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. So, because that's weird. Like, there's lots of ships sink, lots of people die. Why is it that the Titanic is something that's still thought about?
I remember hearing this quote too. Apparently, before the Titanic sunk, there was it was a saying or something of like, only God could sink this ship.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. And that's kind of captured in the name Futility. Like, there's something about the human hubris in the ship. Is like, this is it's like the Tower of Babel, right? This is us at a height,
pinnacle
like we could
of human
do anything.
Advancement.
Yeah. So there's something about when the ship sank. What happened is it became a symbol for two things. A symbol for the epoch, right? This is 1912, 2 years before the First World War, right? This is the end of an era. The ship was almost like a symbol of European society, class divisions. It was a symbol of human power and industrialism, all of that. So it captured so much symbolism that this contingent event became... It was incarnated. It became the meaning. It articulated the meaning of the age. And even more than that, because we're still interested in the Titanic, is there something about the Titanic that captured the truth, some deep truth about what it is to be human, which we could unpack. But the issue there is that's an incarnation. It's when some gristle of reality that's purely contingent becomes the expression of deep truth, of something, deep truth in the moment and deep truth that universally. The Joker is another example. By the way, slight spoiler, if you don't want to if you haven't seen the Joker, maybe fast forward 5 minutes, right? So fast forward 5 minutes right now and come back and listen to this afterwards. But Joker was fascinating because I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I haven't.
A quite phenomenal piece of work.
Yeah.
And the danger they could have done is they could have psychologized the Joker, and there's a whole reason why that's just a bad direction to go. But they didn't psychologize the Joker. What was really interesting is the Joker is this guy who's just a mess, and he's dealing with all of his mental health issues and in a difficult place. But it's in the background of Gotham City, and Gotham City is in absolute disarray, suffering, inequality. The whole thing feels like it's going to fall apart, right? It's 1980s Gotham. It feels like there's just all of this injustice and suffering that can't be articulated. And the moment the Joker becomes the Joker is not when he psychologically, individually becomes this individual. He's just a crazy nihilist out killing people. He's just a mess. It's whenever Gotham City, the people of Gotham City, see in the Joker the articulation of their suffering. So the brilliant thing about the movie is that the Joker becomes the Joker when Gotham City sees him as the articulation of the suffering.
Oh, I see.
So it's fascinating. And the funny thing about it is, so he's the incarnation. He basically makes Gotham City self-aware. Gotham City is now the people are able to articulate their suffering through the Joker, even though the Joker's not a political figure and it's actually just a guy who's out there killing people. That's another type of incarnation where some contingent event, which is this guy, what was his name? Arthur, Arthur something, but this guy Arthur, this contingent event becomes the site in which the city understands itself. And then finally,
understands its suffering.
Its suffering, yeah. And the funny thing is that it's not even the Joker has no insight, but just the belief that the Joker has the insight is enough for the city to become aware of itself.
Okay, I see how this is all tying in. I'm
Yes.
getting this.
You're getting
So
slow,
when we're
right?
talking about if we're going to go back to the Nativity and talk about the birth of Jesus and the life of Jesus and talking about this godlike figure who was born into, poverty essentially and born into nothingness and then being elevated and then dying again like a thief and like a beggar. It is sort of this contingent event that allows us to realize this human experience through this arc of events of this person's life.
Absolutely, because the question is why this figure and nobody else? Like, there's something about this story that still resonates today with millions of people, something that were in which this contingent gristle of reality becomes the incarnation of eternal truth, which is what incarnation means, the God-man. This is, by the way, also what a symptom is. This is brilliant. So a symptom is an event in your body that is contingent, like a bad back, a headache, you grind your teeth, you get anxious about going out, you don't like to answer your phone, whatever it is.
Just described me. Go ahead.
Just did the checklist. Well, yep. And it's these events that actually articulate the truth of who you are. Now, when we encounter a symptom, we often think that a symptom is a problem, i.e. it's like a cancer you can cut out of your body. That's not me, right? You burst into tears for no reason in the car when you're listening to some advert. You go, oh, that's not me. That's weird. That's where you distance yourself. But actually, the idea is, no, that contingent explosion is actually more true.
You.
It's the most you. That's why it's called a parapraxis, because a paramilitary is like a military that's outside the authority of the government. So it's a paramilitary. A parapraxis is a practice that is outside the authority of your consciousness. So it's something you do without realizing it. It's an explosion that you go, that's not me. And an analyst is always looking for your parapraxis or slips of the tongue. It's whenever you're talking about, like whenever a child puts their hand up and says mummy instead of teacher or whatever, you go like, whenever you make a mistake, the mistake is what speaks the truth. And so an analyst isn't listening to what you're saying, because what you're saying is your conscious control. They're looking for the little mistakes. So, for example, I recently was going for coffee. My housemate said, let's go for coffee. And he mentioned this place called Coffee Commissary. I think it's coffee, yeah. And I looked it
Fantastic.
up. It's very good coffee. And I looked it up, but the place was 45 minutes away from where we lived. And I'm like, okay, why am I going here? But I drove all the way there. It's ridiculous. Like, what is going on? So I went there and was like, oh my goodness. And then I got in, and I usually don't order food in a coffee shop, but I ordered all this food and this coffee. And as soon as I'd ordered it, I suddenly thought, I wonder if there's a coffee commissary that's closer to where we live. So I looked it up, and sure enough, there's one 5 minutes away from me.
Of course.
I was about to say, I'm like, I think you said you're downtown, and I think there's one.
Yeah, that's right. It's one a lot closer, yeah. So then what I have to do is I go, instead of thinking, oh, that's a contingent mistake, I went, okay, why is it that I remembered at the very moment that I was pot committed to staying in a coffee shop, I'd bought all this stuff. So I was like, well, do I not want to see my friend? Is there something that's happening that makes me not want to see him? And then I thought about it, I went, yes, actually, there is something, an underlying issue we need to talk about. And so what I realized is this contingent thing about me going to the wrong coffee shop was actually the truth, which is I wanted to avoid seeing him. So what I have to do is I have to listen to the mistakes that I make. And sometimes they actually reveal the truth that I cannot reveal to myself.
So you're saying he was at the one 5 minutes away and you were driven
exactly.
45 minutes.
Yeah,
And you made the choice when you looked up and found 45 minutes away. You didn't text him and say, oh, is it 45 minutes away?
Exactly.
And you didn't look up for any other option. You just went.
I just went, and only as soon as I was committed did it make sense. Or a friend of mine, he went through a divorce, and he has 3 kids, and he would go home every Thursday to read to his kids. And he forgot one week, very stressed at work, so much going on, forgot the day, and he felt really bad about this. Then a week later, he forgot again. And then a week later, he forgot again. And we were talking, and his ex said to him, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to make your kids hate you? And as we talked, he realized, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make my kids hate me, because he so hated himself. But he wasn't confronting that. He was like partying, he was drinking, he was working. He was avoiding confronting his own feelings. And so what he was doing was he was trying to make his children feel about him the way he felt about himself.
And creating a punishment for himself without having to put in the work of facing what he didn't like, what he hated about himself.
Exactly. And the reason why I could see it, and anyone could see it really, is because forgetfulness is one thing. I forget things. But you don't forget your kids. Like he never forgets to meet me. He never forgets a job meeting, but he forgets the most important people in his life. As soon as you that's when you start to see that the difference between forgetting, because you're just, forgetful. Like if you keep forgetting where your keys are when you're going to visit your mum, right? You go like, well, maybe you don't want to see your mum, right? So it's funny. It's like you have to be a detective to your own life. What a detective does, like if you like Columbo, who's my favorite, a detective goes into a crime scene, and the criminal has made everything look the way they want it to look. And all the police are fooled by it, right? So there's one Columbo episode, it was similar to this. They go into this house, this guy's died. It was smoke inhalation, right? The house was on fire. And everyone goes, oh, he's a smoker, he smokes 40 a day. Look, there's the cigarettes, fell on the sofa. That's what happened. And then Columbo, he walks in within 30 seconds, just walks over to one cigarette and looks at it. He says, you see that on the end of the cigarette? Go, there's nothing there. Exactly. He says, when you smoke a cigarette, you suck. And when you suck in, you create a stain of tar on the filter. There's no tar on the filter. He says, therefore, this cigarette's been lit but not smoked. Someone's been here and has made it look as who's not a smoker, who's made it look like this guy smoked and killed himself, right? So what Columbo is doing is he's looking for the one thing that's out of place. Like, what's the one thing that's out of place in your life? That's the symptom. And he's going, that's the truth. That is the truth. So a symptom is an incarnation. It's where a contingent event suddenly takes on the truth of who you are. And that's what Hegel, the philosopher, calls a spirit as a bone, where he says the spirit as a bone means the bone is just this rock and spirit is your subjectivity. Spirit as a bone means in the rock of your symptom, there you are. If I want to know who you are, Freud once said it. He said, if you really look at somebody, you would think that they could not lie, because even if they deceive you with their mouth, they will tell the truth through the tapping of their finger. They'll tell the truth through the little gestures in their eyes, right? In other words, we are always speaking the truth. not with our mouths, obviously, not consciously, but we're always speaking the truth. And the symptom is the sight of truth.
So what does it mean if my car's always disgusting?
Well, there you go. That's an interesting one. Let's see.
Same. Okay, so let's quickly pause. The holidays are upon us, and as we were talking about, sometimes they can be painful, they can cause anxiety or sleepless nights, or even if everything is going smoothly in your life, you might be having one of those 10-hour drives to go see your family, and you know you will be dealing with some terrible back pain after. Well, we have a way to help you feel better. It's Feels. Feels is a premium CBD delivered directly to your doorstep. CBD has been proven to greatly reduce anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness, and Feels is top notch. And it's so easy. All you do is place a few drops of Feels under your tongue, and you will feel the difference within minutes. Personally, Feels has helped a lot with my anxiety. When I start feeling anxious, all I have to do is take a few drops and I experience a lot of relief. And I have pretty bad chronic back pain. And since taking Feels, I've seen a huge difference. But navigating the world of CBD can be complicated. Feels wants to make sure that the process is as simple as possible for you, so you can start feeling better sooner. So Feels offers a free CBD hotline and text message support to help guide your personal experience. They are super accommodating and kind and will answer any of your questions, no matter how big or small. And Feels works naturally to help you feel better. There's no high, no hangover or addiction. You join the Feels community and sign up for the membership to get Feels delivered to your door every month. You'll save money on every order and you can pause or cancel anytime. Feels has me feeling my best every day and it can help you too. Become a member today by going to feels.com/chatty and you'll get 50% off your first order with free shipping. That's feals.com/chatty, feals.com/chatty to become a member and get 50% automatically taken off your first order with free shipping. Feels.com/chatty. But it's so interesting that like when you're talking about this idea that then you have this story that the Nativity that sticks out with everything and a group of people who were expecting what would be commonplace in the day, that their salvation would come in war, would come with power, would come with all this expectation. And yet here's this child who comes and it's vastly different. And that somehow has stuck out in history and been so, like, this affects people who are, like we're saying, this isn't just a Christian thing. This is, worldwide for the most part. And there's something about this specific story that will still rattle us because, I mean, still in this day and age, what is revered is power and warfare and all these things still.
Yes.
And yet we're locked on to the idea of salvation coming in like something dirty, but innocence.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about what you were saying, talking about the symptom, and what I'm kind of gleaning from that is that the meaning is what's out of place, and the meaning is in what's not really supposed to be there. And I think that maybe for those people who the meaning now of the Nativity is lost, maybe there's a lack of context on what's out of place in the story. In terms of the historical context or the culture of the time. And maybe we can look at what's out of place in that story and how that creates meaning.
And it's the most out of place thing of it ever. It's that God is a child. Spirit is bone, God is child. Like, we don't realize how absurd that is. And absurd in the philosophical meaning, it's the coincidence of opposites. People think it's actually not even confessionally Christian, because people think of God as all-powerful creator of the universe.
Omnipresent, but also helpless at the same time. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So Soren Kierkegaard, one of the real founders of modern philosophy and theology, but he wants us to feel the absurdity of this. He wants us to feel how crazy this is before then asking what does it even mean. You go like, it's absolutely insane. And also, you mentioned this is not, like, for the original people, this was not even a Christian thing, because it was pre-Christian. This was happening within Judaism. It was an explosion of an absurd idea in a political and religious context, that in a way is like we don't feel anymore. We don't feel the craziness of it.
Yeah,
Like,
can we unpack that absurdity of it?
Everything, like the wild part about it is everything was absurd, right? The main character for the most part of this was a girl, first of all, which was intense. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're not dealing with women being the figurehead.
Yeah.
You have a young girl who's a virgin, who's not associated with a man yet. And that's the person who Angel goes to and speaks to. That's already absurd.
Yeah.
The piece of the shepherds coming who are like dirty scum is absurd, that they're the ones heralding a message from God. All these people who are associated with the Godheads in this story are all kind of like the lowest of the low.
Yeah, can we unpack
Yeah.
one by one kind of these elements of what makes it sort of absurd? And you touched on maybe the first one of this main character, and maybe can we unpack that further?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the way I think about it is like there's two broad buckets of absurdity in this. And the first is the craziness of the story in its historical context. As you say, like a complete outsider, a woman, a young woman, unmarried, someone who has no voice, no significance in the culture, who births God, who is the mother of God. That is incredible. Again, that's out of place. That's a rupture in the whole structure of meaning. This, by the way, is why. Sorry to come back to Kierkegaard again, but he says something very funny. He pretty much says, whatever you think about Christianity, please don't think of Christ as wise or good. Right? You can say anything else you want about him, but don't say he was a wise man or a good man. And it was one of the things that annoyed him so much, because he said the whole image of Christ strikes us as immoral and foolishness. Like everything about him is about the people we think who are in charge aren't in charge. The people who are right or wrong. The people that we despise are actually the people where God is with. Like there's something about Christ who offends our notions of morality and offends our notions of wisdom. And this is a perfect example of it. Is you would never have thought that this would be where God would enter the world. So that at first is a complete turning of all of our understanding of power and authority. So the two elements then are that here is an emperor who is in a manger, not a mansion, who doesn't have an army of force, but of forgiveness, who actually also forgives before repentance. That was a big thing, because everybody believed in forgiving someone who repents. Every Caesar would have that. Someone would repent, and the Caesar could either kill them or have mercy on them, right?
But only after they repented.
Only after they repented, yeah. But the weird thing about Christianity, one of the innovations of Christ was he seemed to say, no, it's fine. And if grace is you're okay, you don't have to change, you don't have to do anything. And of course, the answer to that is, oh my goodness, then you'll just do whatever you want. But the idea is, whenever I forgive you, that act of forgiveness is so powerful that it makes you want to change. So if you've done something against me and you're all defensive and go, I did nothing wrong, and then I see you and I go, listen, yeah, you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're great. Don't even consider it. And that you will more likely go, oh yeah, actually, I'm really sorry. I was a bit of an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. It's actually the experience of accepting that you're accepted. That's the definition of grace, the acceptance that you're accepted. If you can accept my acceptance of you, it actually transforms you. So again, this is the turning around of all of these things that we just take for granted. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think of the specific example. I think Jesus healed a lame man and said, "Get up and walk. Your sins are forgiven." And sort of like the guy wasn't like, "Please, Lord, forgive me," or anything like that. He was just like, "Okay, get up. You're good," without that repentance that you're talking about. So that makes sense. Yeah. Putting that in context, and that makes sense of how that would be really countercultural, of like not having to beg for repentance in order to be forgiven.
Which
still has a lot of significance.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like in the way we live our interpersonal lives.
Yeah, it kind of cuts across what we naturally assume. Like I would, if we had time, which we wouldn't be able to, but unpack how so much of this is just counter to how we are psychologically, how we grew up So, for example, forgiveness of sin is a great example. Sin's a difficult one because people think sin is being bad or something, but it actually has a very precise meaning. Sin means separation or lack, and we all feel lack in our lives. We feel like that's every time you try to, get married or get money or do this or do that. So often you're doing it because you feel a lack and you think, if only I got this, then I would be good. So we have this experience of lack. And what we think is the way to think about lack, by the way, is a debt, right? If you have a debt, you owe money. So there's a lack of money, right? Now, there's a difference between two types of nothingness. Here's philosophy. If you have no money, that's a lack. You have no money. But if you have debt, that's a nothingness that is something, right? So, or there's a difference between not talking to your partner because you're both just sitting there and not talking to your partner, right? There's two types of silence, right? So there's two types of lack. There's lack of money, and then there's the lack of money, debt. And debt destroys you. You have to do a job you hate. It gives you like anxiety, all of this. Now, to pay a debt is to fill the lack, right? If I pay a debt, I take, you $100, well, here's $100. I fill the lack, I pay the debt. But to forgive a debt is different. If I forgive a debt, I don't say, oh, here's the money. I say the nothingness that is something is nothing. See that money that you owe me, that debt, it's nothing, right? So whenever you say forgive a debt, what that means is the lack that you feel in your life, that you're trying to fill with family, with kids, with money, with fame, with looks, is forgiven. That lack doesn't mean, it's not that you can fill it with something, it's that you can rob it of its sting. We're all lacking, and that's okay. It's wonderful. In fact, that's what makes life so exciting, is that we're all what's called castrated in psychoanalysis. We all lack. We fantasize there's someone who doesn't. We're always looking around thinking someone's got everything, right? But that's a complete fantasy. We all have some sort of lack, and that's okay. So again, this notion of forgiveness of the lack rather than payment of the lack is phenomenal. Like, that's amazing for us today, especially in LA, where it's the most religious place in the world. Everyone's looking to fill the lack through money, fame, looks, yoga, whatever it is. Yeah. And so the idea that you can live with that lack is stunning.
That ties into what I heard you talking about this morning, listening to that podcast episode. I can't remember which philosopher you quoted, but the definition of therapy being like coming to terms with the unhappiness of the everyday.
Yes.
And I think that directly ties into that concept.
It does, absolutely, 100%. And this actually brings it to the universal dimension of the incarnation, because the way I mentioned that in an incarnation there's what you could call, we'll use the term singular, particular, universal. So a singular event happens, the sinking of a ship, right? Sinking of a ship, that's a singular, it just happens, it's a contingent event. But then it has particular meaning for the generation, right? The end of European civilization, the beginning of war, etc. But then it has a universal dimension, which is something that continues to speak beyond its particular
utility,
moment.
Like you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Some deeper meaning, could be the futility of life, and that nothing works. Even our biggest ships, we have to still confront death. You still have to hit the iceberg, right? The end of the world is coming for everybody, right? So in the same way, you could say that there's something about the particular in Christ, which is basically addressing the political situation of the day. But then there's also a universal dimension, and what's that? And I think this is captured in a good joke from Northern Ireland, right? In Northern Ireland, we had a 30-year war called the Troubles. I don't know if you know much about it, but it finished in 1998. And one of the techniques that the IRA used to use is they used to plant incendiary devices in buildings, and then they would phone up the police and say, like, you got 5 minutes to get everybody out, or 10 minutes to get everybody out, right? This happened all the time. And there was this joke going around school at the time that this guy who was in the IRA, this guy called Seamus, right? He dies and he goes up to heaven. And he's sitting at the pearly gates and he's waiting to get in. And eventually St. Peter comes with a big book, sets the book down, opens it up. Big dusty old book, And he's in, looking at this book for about half an hour, goes through it, and he looks up at Seamus and says, listen, mate, he says, your name's not in the book. You're in the IRA, you're not getting in. And Seamus looks at him and says, no, you misunderstand. He says, I'm not trying to get in. You got 5 minutes to get out. Right? Now, I love that little story because I think that's the heart of Christmas. is that we're all trying to escape our humanity. We're all trying to escape our lack. We're all trying to get into heaven, wherever that is, money, fame, family, whatever it is. We want to escape the antagonisms of our lives. We want to get into that heavenly place of pure peace. But the story of Christmas is the story of actually getting the absolute out of heaven into the grit and grime of the world, that actually where meaning is found is in the dirt of life. It's a beautiful image of going, like, if you want to become like God, you have to become human, fully human. Because we all want to become like God. We all want to escape our humanity. That's what Caesar was about. But this story goes, oh yeah, you want to become like the absolute? Well, then embrace your full humanity. And in that embrace, you will be standing in the very sight of the divine.
Sure, because maybe there is no pinnacle of human experience.
Yeah.
Maybe the pinnacle of human experience is accepting the misery that you're in every day.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Which isn't really sad, you know?
Yeah.
It's not. If you can accept it instead of seeking, like you're talking about, to fill this emptiness that may forever be empty if we're constantly searching to fill it.
Because that's the good news of the world, which is bad news. The good news of the world is you can fill that, you can get to the place where everything is perfect and beautiful. But that's bad news, because the more you believe that, the more dissatisfied and anxious you are. Yeah. So the bad news that you can't be whole and you can't be complete and you have to embrace the difficulties of life, that's actually good news, because when you do it, you realize that actually that's where the enjoyment of life is. This is actually this is beautifully captured in the difference between the pleasure principle and the reality principle. So the pleasure principle is this idea that we seek pleasure. Like, I want to climb all the trees I can. I want to eat all the chocolate I can. I want to win all the games that I play. That's the pleasure principle. And then the reality principle is, you can't eat all the chocolate you want because your mum won't let you. You can't climb all the trees you want because your body won't let you. You can't win all the games you want because your friends won't let you. So reality principle gets in the way of pleasure. But what Freud realized very early on was that actually it's the reality principle that gives you the pleasure principle. If you got rid of all of the obstacles and you were able to climb Mount Everest immediately, you were able to get $1 billion without thinking, you were able to get everything you want without obstacle, you wouldn't be left with happiness. It would be actually hell. Heaven would be hell.
Which comes full circle when we talked about relationships in the beginning.
Yes.
And like this dance of obstacle and like a little bit of chaos. And, you know, this, I don't want to like romanticize poverty or struggle or anything like that by any means. But it's kind of funny. When I went on The Bachelor 2 years ago, you know, I still am young. I'm 24 right now. And coming off of the show, you know, when I was little, all I wanted was to be famous. All I wanted was to be a celebrity. And I was like, that has got to be the coolest thing you could possibly be. And of course, when I was working as a nanny and I was struggling in college and all this, you're like, I remember saying, if I could just get to be rich enough where I could pay the $15 parking fee at the beach and not think about it, then I would be happy. If I could just pay that $15 parking fee and not give a shit, that'd be great. And then I came off of the show. And, I mean, it's The Bachelor. It's not like I was fucking Jennifer Aniston or anything like that. But there's a certain level of fame where, like, people are recognizing you, like, on the street fairly often, like, at the airport. Like, people are wanting to take photos with you in the first few months after. And there's a certain level of fame. People, you know, you're going on talk shows and people are talking about you. And
you're finally happy. You finally got there. You finally were fulfilled.
She did it. Also, financial stability without having to try, of being able to, you know, work on social media and all this sort of thing and make money without really lifting a finger in a certain sense. And oh my God, I mean, I know it's a cliche, but it was one of the most like depressing years of my life. And it was so hard for me to grapple with, like, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
And even now I really struggle with, like, I'll come up with ideas of like little side hustles of like little jobs and stuff I could do. And then I think, like, what's the point? Like, I'm already financially stable. Like, why would I, you know, spend my time doing this? This would only be fun back if I was 20 again, like struggling.
Yes.
And just
Yes.
like realizing all of that is really depressing when you
Yeah.
actually get to all those things that you really did think you're going to, even though people say, you know, money and fame can't buy you happiness. A lot of us don't really
We don't really
that.
believe it. We don't
No.
really believe it.
I think even
Yeah.
like as simple as like for our listeners, so many of our listeners are married. And I would say this,
Oh, yeah.
when I dated my husband for many years, and we would always go back and forth because I'd be like, I'm unhappy in this part of like our relationship, and it'll all be settled if you'll just fucking marry me. Like, put a ring on my finger and then it'll be fine, and we'll move in to our little home together and everything's going to be great. And we got married, and the first year of our marriage was really bad.
Yeah.
Because there was that expectation of that as soon as you get what you want, everything's going to be beautiful and peachy keen. And then all of a sudden we're married, and I'm sure a lot of people could relate, like, hey, once you get married, it doesn't fix your problems. In fact, sometimes it just...
Sometimes you have more lack once you get everything
Right.
that you wanted. You suddenly have this more lack, but of something that you now have no idea how to fill. Because before you had this lack, and you thought, if I get fame and money and like marriage and all this stuff, then that's going to fill this lack. But then when you still have a lack, you're like, what the fuck do I fill this with?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, you're robbed even of the fantasy, so it's even
Yes.
worse because at least before you have the fantasy
Of something to chase.
Yes, but now you're left with with the brokenness and not even a fantasy. René Girard, philosopher, he once said that. He said, imagine a man in a field, a rocky field, and he's told there's a treasure under one of the rocks, but he's lifted up so many rocks and he hasn't found the treasure. René Girard said, eventually he will seek a rock so heavy he cannot lift. And what Girard is basically saying is that sometimes we want to continue to have the fantasy that something will work, and we'll just create more and more obstacles rather than face this idea that, yeah, I mean, money can get you a better shower. When I moved to America, I had a patron who was supporting my work, and he lent me this beautiful house, and you can get good air conditioning and all of that, but
Nice.
it doesn't fix the existential angst in your life. Even the winners lose. This is called the failure of success. In a sense, you succeed, and in succeeding, you hit a fundamental failure. But that's the first step to the success that's in failure, which is when you fully confront that failure, then you can move into something much, much richer, much better.
How do you begin to confront that kind of failure and confront that emptiness?
Yeah,
or
like what is
unhappiness?
like this Christmas story teaching us of like what that the grittiness, like, yeah, what does that look like practically to get to that?
Yeah. I mean, this is actually interesting about the story because, people think, well, why do you need this indirect approach to embracing your humanity, right? Why do you need this notion of like, I want to become like God, and God becomes fully human, so I confront my full humanity? But actually, that's the way we work, is that often, again, if someone goes to a psychoanalyst, they want to escape their suffering. They're there because they want to get rid of it. They don't want to face it. Just get me fixed again. Just get me right. And then the analyst has to very, very subtly over time help you face what you cannot face on your own. It's just like when Kierkegaard said about music, is it's so difficult to confront these difficulties and the lack. That we'll do anything to avoid it. We need art, we need music, we need friends, we need liturgical structures that help us do it because it's so hard. So in a sense, there's never a direct route to your humanity. It's always indirect. And so this idea is like you identify with God in this story, and I want to, because all God is the one who lacks the lack. In a sense that just think about it as God is the one who is whole and complete. So we want to be whole and complete. We want that. And then through the Nativity, we confront our humanity. That's why I do the work that I do, is because I go like, we can't do it directly. In fact, weirdly, to believe as human, to doubt divine, right? To believe and to have and to kind of pursue wholeness and completion, that's easy for us to do, really. We believe that naturally, that something's out there that's going to fix us. But if we want to embrace doubt, complexity, and ambiguity, if we want to look at our own suffering, then we need a lot of help. Yeah.
It's just like the idea of maybe having Christmas, and I'm thinking about like someone who's maybe sitting alone right now and maybe doesn't have family during the holidays and feels like the lowest that they can be, or whatever, maybe lost someone recently, like in their family, and just the idea of this story and like the grittiness and the like trauma that really came from this story. The idea that at this moment, when you first came in here and talked about like walking into the dark, and that's then where you're ultimately going to find the light. The idea of like this nativity coming around to winter solstice, where it's like the darkest days, but we know like in a couple weeks, it's going to be the brightest days again. And to know that like there's this idea of this nativity and like winter solstice in the end maybe of 2019 or whatever it may be, where you might be in like the darkest moment of your life right now, but like that means that that's where you have to go to find your light, which maybe seems simple. It's not going to be that house on the hill.
Yeah.
But it's maybe just coming to terms with the fact that your existence here is what might be the most beautiful thing of all.
Yes, it crazily, like, instead of going away from the darkness, is turning the darkness up even more. Because the strange thing is, well, it'll make sense, I think, in a second, is actually so much depression is connected to this unconscious, often, belief that there's something that would work. If I had only been with him, it would have been amazing. If I'd only got that job, if only I was healthier, if only I looked a certain way. So every time you do that, you have this fantasy that if only you had this thing, what's called object A or sacred object, everything would be wonderful.
Even if that thing is just happiness itself.
Yeah.
Too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, yeah. So when you turn it up even more, you get to this point where you go, that doesn't exist. And weirdly, that's where you're free. You're going like, oh, I could have been with that person and it could have been good, but it would have still had its struggles, right? I could have had, there's no escape from the deadlocks and antagonisms of reality. And in fact, funnily enough, in physics, we see this, that reality itself is a deadlock. What's called wave-particle duality is the universe has deadlock built into it. In biology, it's called evolution. In mathematics, it's Gödel's uncertainty principle or incompleteness theorem. So you've got, these antagonisms you feel is part of reality. So in a way, when you're in the darkest place, you're experiencing the truth. More so than me, who's running around trying to get into the Christmas spirit, sing Christmas carols and think everything's great. You are in the truth. And if you can embrace that truth, you will find a way into a new type of life, a deeper type of life, a more enriching type of life. But every time we fantasize about something that will fix us, that's what causes all of the problems we can imagine.
Yeah, it's a little ironic, isn't it, that we live in a culture that is basically selling us on like this pinnacle of human experience of finally getting to a place where we're happy.
Yeah.
But then the irony is that so many people in America, like the vast majority, are like, why the fuck am I not happy like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I don't think that's really anyone's experience unless they're, I don't know. I've met some people like that, who are just like, I've got, everything is balanced and I'm at peace. Like, and I'm like, well, or they're just fucking kidding themselves. Yeah. And or they don't realize that they're full of it, but they're kidding themselves.
We're all very good at that.
Yeah. And wanting to be the person that's happy and wanting to be the person that's like stoked on life. And it's confusing, I think, for a lot of people because they're like, why can I not get to that place that it seems like so many other people are at, this place of like happiness, and it doesn't really exist. Or it's just fleeting or it's temporary.
Fleeting.
That's the other thing.
This is the difference between pleasure and happiness. If you think of like Christmas, happiness is opening the Christmas present, and pleasure, or actually I should use the proper words, enjoyment and pleasure. We'll use those two words. That pleasure is the opening of the present, and that's fleeting and that's never that impressive, right? And the enjoyment is the waiting for the present. Now, the problem is most of us can't enjoy our enjoyment. So if you see a child waiting for Christmas, they're wetting themselves. They're so frustrated. They just want the present. You can see them. They're in enjoyment, but they're not enjoying their enjoyment. They're experiencing it as suffering. So
yes, anxiety.
Anxiety, yeah. So the trick is, how do we enjoy our enjoyment? Because yes, there are moments of pleasure, which is like if you're watching your football team and they win, you go, that's brilliant. Yeah, we're really happy. But the real enjoyment is in being with your team when they're losing and winning. And like if your team won every time, all the enjoyment would be robbed of it. This actually connects. The reason why I wanted to use the word enjoyment is because joy is basically the happiness of not getting what you want. It's the pleasure you get in the struggle of life itself. But in our society and in our subjectivity, we're always so focused on pleasure, the moment, when we can't enjoy the movement and the struggle itself. So a lot of it is just simply refocusing yourself and going, oh yeah, like I'm looking at houses to buy and I think that I just want the house. But actually what I really enjoy is looking on the internet and going around the houses.
Welcome to my life.
Yes, they say.
I'm still looking on Redfin every day. And
And that's where the real enjoyment is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people realize, because there's two parts. There's what's called the object of desire, which is the house, and the object cause of desire, which is actually what gets in the way of you getting the house. So if you get the object of your desire, then you lose the object cause of your desire. So you no longer desire what you desire. So you have the house and you no longer want it. So the question is, so a lot of it is just going like, oh, I actually really do directly enjoy the looking online and doing all of that. And that very change of focus can actually help you enjoy your enjoyment.
I love that too. Sorry, just because the word joy is so central in like the holiday season. That's like such a focus of Christmas is always the word joy. But I feel like just by nature, we're looking for the happiness in Christmas. It's the buying of presents for everyone. It's going to the parties. It's hanging out with the family.
It's not having Christmas presents for people and panicking about
full
that.
panic.
You know?
And then having the major post-holiday blues afterwards, being like, well, like looking around at like all the wrapping paper and being like, I guess I got to clean all this shit up now. I just hung up.
Yeah.
But it's like we were talking about earlier with you decorating. It's now enjoying the month of looking at like setting up the tree and looking at the tree instead of that moment of like, you know.
No, and the enjoyment was me stringing cranberries with dental floss and a needle and being like, this is so fucking tedious. Why am I doing this?
Okay, let's pause quickly for one last time. We have to be honest. We couldn't really have a holiday episode without talking about FabFitFun, our personal Christmas present all year round. At least that's what it feels like when it arrives at your front door. FabFitFun is the lifestyle subscription box filled with full-size premium beauty, lifestyle, fitness, home, and wellness products sent straight to your doorstep each season, and each box is customized to your specific interests. We love a box filled with choices. Yes, FabFitFun. FabFitFun retails for $49.99, but always has a value of over $200. I mean, you get your money's worth in this box. In fact, many products cost more than you pay for the entire box, especially with this winter box, which is now on sale. The winter box has some amazing products. Amazing like Kate Somerville Goat Milk Moisturizing Cream, insane R&Co shampoo and conditioner, a rose gold Swarovski bracelet, and a whole lot more. Oh, and the winner's charity partner for FabFitFun is the Women's Alzheimer Movement, dedicated to raising awareness about women's increased risk for Alzheimer's and to educating the public about lifestyle changes that they can make to protect their brain health. We love FabFitFun, and we know you love FabFitFun too, so we have a code for you. Use coupon code CHATTY to get $10 off your first box at www.fabfitfun.com, making it only $39.99 for more than $200 worth of amazingness. Again, that's coupon code CHATTY for $10 off your first box at fabfitfun.com.
You know, when you're talking about this, I was thinking the other day of like, who are the people that I know that are like really happy? And a person that came to mind is my dad. I'm like, he is one of the people that I know that is like genuinely like one of the most happy people. And as you're talking about recognizing and being able to enjoy this enjoyment, that is like how he lives every day of his life. And he always tells me, he's like, I love starting new businesses and having them fail and all of that, because it's like, it's about the pursuit. Yeah. And that's the fun part for me. And he's the same way with houses, where I swear to God, as I was growing up, every fucking Sunday after church, we would be going to a goddamn open house, you know, and looking at the house and saying like, which one would be our room. And my dad would always have like a new car, even if it wasn't a new car, he would always be switching out cars and, you know, buying a different old car and all this kind of thing. And, but it wasn't like this pursuit of trying to find the next thing that's going to make me happy. It was just enjoying the in-between phase of looking forward to this next thing. Yeah. And being okay with the failure because there's going to be just something else, another failure, and maybe another success that comes along, and just sitting in that in-between place. And it also makes him way less stressed about things.
Yes.
Because when the relationships with his children are awry, when things are not going well with business, it's just like, well, this is part of the dance of movement.
And he will be healthier, he will live longer, less stress in his life. This is why I hated my sister, by the way, because at Easter, when he got Easter eggs, I would eat my Easter egg immediately to stuff it in my mouth as quickly as possible. And my sister would nibble and then put it in the fridge, rewrap it, put it in the fridge, and then come back and the next day nibble a little bit more and then put it back in the fridge. She could make an Easter egg last for a year, right? And I hated it because I was looking for the object of satisfaction, eat the egg, and then I'm unhappy as soon as it's finished. She knew that the pleasure was partly in pissing me off and partly in kind of just the never finishing the egg.
And in
just
waiting for that time of day when she would unwrap it and have that little bite.
She was much happier than me, you know. So because when you have the object, you're unhappy if you don't have it, and you're unhappy when you have it. That's it. So you lose when you lose, and you lose when you win. We live in a society where even the winners lose. The losers lose doubly, but even the winners lose. And how can we create a community around a shared lack? And there are examples. And I'll just give you one example. AA. So there's two types of community. A community that focuses around a shared thing that you can have. And that always ends up in scapegoating. Because if you believe in a perfect utopia, then you have to blame someone for it not working. So what you do is you take the contradiction and you turn it into opposition. You say, well, it's because of those people over there that we don't have.
Spoiling all the
spoiling all the fun, right? Yeah. We want to get rid of them. And right or left, whoever, to some group that is the scapegoat, literally the carrier of the lack. But then you can have communities that go, hold on, we have to carry our own lack. And those communities then take on their own brokenness in a community of grace where everyone is accepted. So in AA, you'd sit there and you're in a place where you're accepted. And before you even get onto the first step, there's step 0. Just like in European lifts, there's 0 floor. In America, it's always the first floor. 0 is a number, 0 is 1 because you can count it, right? So 0. The first step is step 0. And step 0 is just you're in a community of grace where everyone accepts you. And that allows you to speak your truth. You say, I'm an alcoholic. And then you can begin to change. So the community is actually focused around a shared lack. We're all broken. You know, in the past, I said I wasn't an alcoholic. In the past, I said it was other people's fault. In the past, I blamed my work, my family, and all of that. But now I'm in a place where I can just admit my own lack,
that
my
I'm
own
the
brokenness,
problem.
that I'm the problem. That is, you know, and as soon as you do that, you begin to change. So and even Burning Man in its original form was a community around a lack, a burning of an effigy, right? So we were unified, not in our shared belief, but in our shared lack. Actually, the Last Supper is a perfect example, a community that's bound together around the death of God, the lack of God. So I think it is possible to create communities in which we embrace the lack. And my belief is that as more and more of us do this individually and communally, we can actually have a very positive effect on our country and our communities. Because actually most of the human evil that we see in the world is either pursuing something that we think will fill the lack or hating someone else because we think they've got it and we don't. There's an old, I think it's a Romanian parable. It says this farmer has been working all his life. And the angel comes to him and says, you know, God has seen how much you've worked and he wants to bless you. And so he wants to give you whatever you want. And the farmer's about to speak, and then the angel stops him and says, no, it gets even better than that, because whatever God gives you, he's going to give your neighbor double. And so the farmer looks at the angel and says, well, take one of my eyes. Which is, you know, fascinating thing, which is sometimes that we so hate the other that we would hurt ourselves in order to hurt the other. Because we often fantasize that the other has something that we want, and we so want to hurt them that we'll even destroy ourselves. So for me, if I could tell you one more joke from Ireland that I think fills this in, and then we can go anywhere else, but I think it captures it. It's a story about this rich Texan, right? He made a fortune in oil, but his great-great-grandfather came from Ireland. So he goes back to visit. And when he gets there, he looks up the ancestry. He goes to Galway, and he finds this little farmhouse where there's a relative, and he knocks on the door, and this old guy Seamus opens the door, right? And the Texan says, oh, you know, we're related. So my great-great-great-great-grandfather left the Emerald Isles, went to America, made a fortune in oil, and now I'm back to retrace my roots. So Seamus says, oh, come on, have a cup of tea. So they're drinking tea, and then the Texan says, you want to show me around your farm? And so Seamus says, absolutely, brings him out the back and says, you see that old tractor there? He says, that tractor to here, that's all mine. And he says, and that tree stump to here, that's all mine. Oh, and that little broken fence to here, he says, that's all mine. And the Texan laughs, he laughs. He says, back home, he says, I can get in my car and I can drive all day north, I wouldn't get to the end of my land. He says, I could drive all day east, I wouldn't get to the end of my property, or all day west, or all day south. And Seamus looks at him and says, he says, I know how you feel. He says, I used to have a car like that as well. That is the truth right there. I think if you can understand that, you can understand the meaning of Christianity, which is we can all pretend that we've got the thing, you know, the money, the land, the whatever. But you know what? We've all got broken cars. We can't escape the lack. Even when you've got everything, you'll just be confronted with the lack. And it's in Seamus's Christological insight. Like, I have a broken car. We all got broken cars. We're all struggling. That insight can free us from a negative form of being in the world, can help us be more gracious to ourselves and the people around us, and can help us to avoid scapegoating. Because when you can't carry your own lack, you get someone else to carry it, which means you make poor people, you make homeless people, you make prison populations, all of that, those are not the problem. The prison population, the homeless population is the solution to a problem. It's a solution to a problem in our society that we cannot see. So when we go to the homeless, we are not good news to them, they are good news to us, because they show us a problem within our own community. They show us what we cannot face. They are the truth that we cannot look at. They are the symptom of our world. The symptom of our world, symptom, by the way, sounds like symptôme. And there's a psychoanalyst, Lacan, says symptôme in French sounds like holy man, which means prophet. The symptom is a prophet that speaks the truth. So you listen to the prophet, the symptom, it will speak the truth. If you listen to that, you will be changed. And if you refuse to listen to the prophet, it will speak devastation. And so the question is, can we embrace our lack? Can we look at our symptoms individually, our bad backs and our inability to sleep and our anxiety? Can we look at our communal symptoms in terms of homelessness or mental health provision, whatever? And can we allow those to speak into us, and will that allow us to create a better world?
And can we admit that that's what we're doing, that we're not pouring into when we go into, fucking Africa and we say, oh, I'm going on my 2-week mission trip to help these people. Can we admit and say, I'm actually going for these 2 weeks to inform myself of what my lack is in my life.
They are my salvation.
I'm not going to
That's
pour
it.
myself, and if we can admit that to ourselves and saying, I'm not going to feed the homeless to pour into them, it's to enlighten me about what I need to change in my life.
100%.
I mean, if we can get honest about that, that's pretty radical.
Yeah. I mean, that could be the very, very heart of the message of Christ, because in the crucifixion, there's this idea that Christ is the one you have to kill to get to God. And then you realize that Christ is God. In other words, the obstacle that you think you have to get rid of to get to God is God. So with the Apostle Paul, he has a conversion. He's trying to get rid of this small band of people called Christians. It could be anybody. He thinks if we can get rid of the Christians, we can get back to true religion. And then he hears a voice saying, why are you persecuting me? In other words, the very group that he thinks is the problem is where God is speaking. And that's what transforms him. So yeah, when we look at kind of whatever group that we think, oh, we have to get rid of that group, that is the sight that speaks the truth. And if we listen to that, we can be transformed. So we need to be saved. This is about what Christianity is about. It's about being a person who is willing to be born again and say, I'm the one who needs salvation. I need saved.
Yeah, what's that saying? Something about like hatred is a mirror or something like that. And what are we really seeing in the people that we despise? Maybe it's the thing that we despise within ourselves.
That's it. Like whether even so, take the most extreme example of fascism. Fascism is a group of people who go, we want to get back to an organic relationship with the world. There's a kind of organic wholeness to community. And the figure of the Jewish community are preventing that with their abstraction, with their power. And if we can get rid of the Jews, then we can get back to wholeness and completeness. But what the fascist community doesn't realize is actually the Jewish community is preventing them from seeing their own brokenness. If they got rid of the Jewish community, they would just be confronted with the lack. The scapegoat mechanism is that we cannot face our own lack and we put it onto somebody else. And so this idea is going like, we become like the fascist community when we have some group that we think we just have to get rid of and everything will be fine, rather than the AA community that can embrace the lack. But it can also be homelessness or something. You can go like, oh, if we could get rid of the homeless population, but you're treating the homeless population like a cancer you can cut out. What if the homeless population exists in its form because there are issues within the society? And of course, you should look after homeless people, but you should also ask why homeless people exist. What is it saying about?
Will this stop if we build more houses, or is this
more systemic?
Not that we shouldn't do those things like you're saying, not that we shouldn't take care of people, but look at the greater systemic issues that are creating this problem.
Just as individuals, if we're trying to get rid of a symptom like, oh, I crunch my teeth at night, you go, okay, that's fair enough. You maybe want to cum guard or whatever, but also maybe ask yourself, like, maybe you're in a relationship where you want to shout at the person, you're angry at the person, but you're afraid to express that because then they might break up with you. And so the clenching of your teeth in your sleep is the amalgamation of conflictual desire. I want to speak, but I want to stay quiet. And as you come to terms, as you begin to understand that, the symptom begins to dissipate. Yeah, you can get a gum guard. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you understand the symptom, you can dissipate it. It's hard work, but we have to be detectives to our own bodies. Yeah.
I just want we could just go on and on. I just wanted to say one last thing. My brain was kind of going in another direction and was thinking about how, and maybe the problem is that we're approaching our problems with the idea that acquisition will give us happiness, when maybe part of the antidote is creation. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about, for looking at the symbolism of the Bible and talking about the Genesis story even, and God, if God is all powerful, could create everything in the snap of a finger conceptually. Yeah. But what does it mean that this omnipowerful being created all of these things in the course of 7 days and worked to the point of needing to rest on the seventh day, even though this is an all-powerful being, and thinking about how maybe that's a message that even if we can, like maybe what we're chasing oftentimes is to be able to have everything in the snap of the finger, right? Mm-hmm. The fame or the wealth, to be able to acquire things when we want them, but that true enjoyment, like you were talking about, is enjoying the creation of not the thing that we get at the end, but that process.
Yes.
And just thinking about how can we bring moments of creation into our lives, whether that's, making a song or painting or whatever, but maybe going back to what in my job, even if it is a desk job, what am I creating on a daily basis, and how can I pour my heart into that creation? And
then what happens, which is amazing, is then the what do you call it? The externality, or the outworking of that, which you don't even realize, is that a better life. So what happens is, when you stop thinking about the object that you want and you start enjoying the struggle, you enjoy the struggle, but as you struggle forward, say you're a writer, if you're a writer and you think, I want to write the best book ever, that is 9 times out of 10 going to stop you from writing the book, right? But if you are a writer and you're able to think, I just enjoy the struggle of the writing, then what you'll find is you'll keep writing books, but the books aren't the important bit, but you'll end up in 10 years, you'll have written 10 books. If you think the book and the book launch is going to make you happy, you're going to be sorely disappointed. You're going to be unhappy working towards the book, because you're just thinking, I just want to get the book finished. I want to get the book finished. And then you're going to be unhappy when that terrible day comes when you launch the book, because literally nothing happens, right? But if you just enjoy the struggle, you do it, and then you write books, and you can have pleasure in that, like a little moment of drinking a little glass of champagne with your friends and going, I finished the book. That's lovely. But so weirdly, as a society, as an individual, when you start to embrace the struggle that you're talking about, you also weirdly start to improve your life. Like, good things will come along and happen, but they're not the thing that you're focused on. So strangely, it's great to have a space where you're allowed to pursue what will make you happy. But what we're talking about here is the freedom from the pursuit of happiness. We're free to struggle and enjoy and not have to get. And weirdly, as I say, once you really embrace that, Hegel called this absolute knowledge, is when you actually realize that there's just antagonism's part of the universe and part of us and part of who we are. And we can enjoy that and move with it. But weirdly, as we absolutely accept that, we do start to achieve more. We will actually start to move forward more with our careers, with our vocations. And of course, the trick is this. This is the bad trick for the people listening to this, is if you're listening to this and going, okay, so I have to embrace the struggle so that I can get to where I want to be, then you're not doing it. You haven't reached absolute knowledge yet. Absolute knowledge is when you genuinely lose your life and then find it. But you can only find it when you genuinely enter into the loss of it.
People talk about it in love, right? Like I didn't find my true love until like I just sort of gave up on love altogether. And people say my husband came along when I least expected it. And it usually at that point where that person truly says, I just don't give a fuck anymore.
Yes,
I'm just going to live my life for myself and instead of trying to find a husband.
Walking into the dark again.
But you can't fake it.
But the first thing that someone thinks whenever they hear that is, okay, I'm going to give up.
This is what I need to do in order to get
now I need to give up.
Now I need to give up. Now I need to give up. And that's the frustrating thing about this journey is there's no shortcuts, because that's our first place to go is, okay, I'm going to give up so as I can get the partner. But it's like, no, you have to really give up.
You have to really pursue release, not that thing.
And then when you do, you may not find a partner, but you genuinely won't care because you'll find something else.
Yeah.
But I think it's just exciting to know that like here we all are together, all of you listening, and none of us have it figured out.
Well, I do, and you can DM me about
DM
that.
me when you have all the questions. But we're just
for a high enough Patreon level, you can get the answer. I don't know.
exactly. But just the idea of here we are in this holiday season, and the focus being like enjoy to the world and embrace the lack.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, that was loads of fun.
This is like,
loved it.
I feel like for everyone listening, like when you step into your different family situations or friend situations, or whether you're alone or whatever, just it's exciting to know that now we're going to be getting into 2020 here soon, and to maybe kind of walk into it with the idea of what you were talking about today, Pete, and
It makes things a little lighter, right? And a little more humorous.
a little more peaceful.
And just being like, yeah, my family fucking sucks and I hate being at Christmas with them.
I'm counting down the hours till we're done, but I'm going to enjoy the lack that my family is. Here we go.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that we started off saying about, I said like, oh, my work's a bit dark, but actually we ended up going like, yeah, the darkness is where the joy is. So there you go.
Light.
Yeah. That was, what do you call that? A callback in comedy. You can pretend that this was all on purpose. We had this story arc. But wow,
Arc the whole time.
we did it.
So where can our listeners find you?
And your work.
Oh yeah. So there's loads of free stuff online. I have a podcast called The Fundamentalists, which I do with a comedian friend, Elliot Morgan. There's lots of talks online, and then I do lots of courses on my Patreon as well. So if you just type in my name, you will find, seek and you shall find.
We'll make it easy to find broads by putting all that info in the episode notes.
Well, thank you so much to you, Pete. Thank you
thank you.
our listeners for tuning in, and happy holidays.
Happy
to you all.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Chat soon.
Bye, broads.